Hi guys, the movie I chose was The Perks of Being a Wallflower. It was released in 2012 and was actually based off of the book The Perks of Being a Wallflower. The main idea behind this movie is that the main character, Charlie, has definitely faced a lot of adversity within his life, I guess you could say. He is very quiet. He's always been seen as the quiet person. He's never been open with his family at home, and he's never had any real true friends. He goes to high school. It's his first day of high school, and right off the bat he meets a girl named Sam and a guy named Patrick. I guess you could consider them all outcasts. Sam is viewed as the girl in high school who will hook up with anybody, who will do anything with anybody, known as the easy girl. And Patrick is Sam's stepbrother, who is openly queer to everybody in school, and he is just seen as rambunctious and wild, but he's mainly just expressing himself, but obviously society sees him as being wild. Patrick and Sam actually meet Charlie, the main character, at the football game, and they all begin to hang out. Patrick and Sam introduce Charlie to their friend group, and they all just become one big friend group. The main reason that I chose this movie was because there is so many items that we've talked about in class that appear in this movie. They obviously talk about the queer community, and they eventually talk about the violence that they face towards the end of the movie. They also touch on homophobia, sexual assault, mental health, drugs and alcohol abuse, suicide, and just the stress to fit in with norms in society. The director of this movie was Stefan Chbosky. He grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where the movie is actually based out of. The movie's setting is the 1990s in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I just thought it was interesting. I did some more research on what was going on during those times, considering the queer community and also just mental health awareness in general. Obviously, mental health awareness was very low at this time. I mean, it was known about, but it wasn't something that is taken as seriously as it is today. This is also the time when the AIDS crisis kind of was slowly beginning to settle back down. And obviously the queer community was not given legal rights yet at this time. There was no gay marriage. There was nothing like that yet. So obviously members of the queer community were looked down upon still. So I think that setting the movie during that time frame definitely helped make the movie send the message more to the audience about what Patrick, the openly queer character, was going through at this time. I felt that this movie was super compelling and is super important to watch because it is such a realistic and humanistic feel. You truly get to understand the internal battles that people face because of their home lives, because of the pressures they feel at school, their internal mental processes and what causes them to feel that way. It also represents societal norms and stereotypes that many people face and how people deal with that and how they tend to break down those barriers. And I also just think it's important because we've all grown up. We've all gone through the awkward stages in middle school, high school, and I think that watching other people go through those difficult personal experiences kind of, we can relate to that because we've all been there. We've all tried to find our personal identity at some point to make us who we are. So I just think that this movie truly engulfs the idea that everybody's gone through this and everybody's always felt like that awkward person at some point in their life. The three main sources that I chose were all articles. The very first one was called The Perks of Being a Wallflower Film Analysis. It was more of a cinematography outlook on things. It mainly is just encompassing one of the last scenes within the movie. It's called Charlie's Last Letter, but it's this tunnel scene when everybody is just kind of shown as being perfectly happy in the end. This article definitely touched on the costumes, the lighting, camera angles, and music that was shown. So I think that it said the costumes definitely represented each character and the way that they controlled their personality, how they represented themselves to others. The lighting was bright and golden during this scene, so it represented being a happy scene, and the tunnel represented the light at the end of the tunnel, so they have come to the end of their hard journey. The camera angles also showed up close on the characters' faces, showing their emotions directly to the audience, so that allowed the audience to understand and relate to those emotions better. And then the next article that I chose was called What I Learned About Gay Love. It just basically talked about how Patrick embodied the consequences of a lack of exposure to love and how our society has created that lack of exposure. It also talked about the effects that a heteronormative household can have on a person with a queer identity. And it also talked about the effects on children coming out and the whole idea behind coming out and how that can be such a scary and new thing to some people. It also said that within this article that it felt that the movie as a whole was kind of getting at the fact that true love, queer love is impossible to ever reach, which I would agree with because that's how the movie ended, was with Patrick never truly finding someone, so I definitely could agree with that. And then the last article that I chose was called Survivorhood Portrayed. It just basically talked about the mental health that comes into play in this movie. Talked about suicide, substance abuse, and it also said that more than half of sexual assault victims are under 18. So I feel like that brought reality more to the situation because a lot of the kids that have dealt in this movie with sexual assault were under 18, is still currently in high school. Another thing that I found important about this article was that they touched on the fact that Charlie, which you will soon realize is a victim of sexual assault himself, it portrays a male victim versus a female victim, which I think was something really important to touch on because there tends to be that stereotype that, oh, only men will do bad things to women. So I feel like this was an important flip to that to represent that, no, it can happen to anyone. And then lastly, the questions that I wanted to ask was, what do you think was the point of Charlie telling his story through letters throughout the entire movie? And did this add or take away from the story behind him as a character? The next one was, do you think the way Patrick was shown in the film was beneficial to the queer community, or were there items that fed into the stereotypes held about this kind of group? And then the last question I had was, what did the final tunnel scene mean to you? What were your initial emotions and what from the scene caused those? Thank you.